Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into one of the most pivotal stories in modern history, the American Revolution. How did a collection of British colonies, separated by an ocean from their ruling power, decide to break away and form a brand new nation? It's a tale of taxes, tea, and a powerful idea called liberty. So grab your cup of coffee and let's journey back to the 18th century. Our story really begins not with a bang, but with the end of another war, the French and Indian War, or the 7 Years' War as it was known in Europe. This global conflict, which ended in 1763, was incredibly expensive for Great Britain. Even though they won, securing vast new territories in North America, the British treasury was nearly empty. King George III and his government looked at the American colonies, which had benefited from British military protection, and thought, well, it's only fair they help pay off this massive war debt. This decision marked a major shift in British policy. For decades, the colonies had enjoyed a period of salutary neglect, where London pretty much left them to govern themselves. But now, Parliament started passing a series of new taxes aimed directly at the colonists. First came the Sugar Act in 1764, which, despite lowering the tax on molasses, was more strictly enforced. Then, the real firestorm, the Stamp Act of 1765. This was the first direct tax on the colonists, requiring them to buy a special stamp for all sorts of paper goods, newspapers, legal documents, even playing cards. The colonists were furious. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the principle. A powerful slogan began to echo through the streets of Boston, Philadelphia, and Williamsburg: "No taxation without representation." The colonists argued that since they had no elected representatives in the British Parliament had no right to tax them. Protests erupted. Groups like the Sons of Liberty formed, organizing boycotts of British goods. The pressure was so intense that Parliament eventually repealed the Stamp Act in 1766. It was a victory for the colonists, but a temporary one. The very same day, Parliament passed the Declaratory Act, asserting that it had the full right to make laws for the colonies in all cases whatsoever. The message was clear. London was still in charge. And they proved it a year later with the Townshend Acts, which taxed imported goods like glass, lead, paper, paint, and tea. Once again, boycotts and protests swept the colonies. Tensions were rising, and you could feel something was about to snap. The breaking point came on a cold March day in 1770 in Boston. A crowd of colonists began taunting and throwing snowballs at a group of British soldiers. The situation escalated, shots were fired, and 5 colonists were killed. This event, which became known as the Boston Massacre, was sensationalized by patriots like Paul Revere and Samuel Adams. They used it as powerful propaganda to show the tyranny of British rule. It shocked the colonies and led to the repeal of most of the Townshend taxes except for one, the tax on tea. The British government kept the tea tax as a symbol of their authority. And this brings us to one of the most famous acts of defiance in American history, the Boston Tea Party. In 1773, to help the struggling British East India Company, Parliament passed the Tea Act. This act actually made British tea cheaper for the colonists, even with the tax. But the colonists saw it as a trick, a way to make them accept Parliament's right to tax them. So, on a December night, a group of Sons of Liberty, disguised as Native Americans, boarded 3 ships in Boston Harbor and dumped over 300 chests of tea into the water. This was the final straw for King George and Parliament. They responded with a series of punitive laws known as the Coercive Acts, or as the colonists called them, the Intolerable Acts. These acts closed the port of Boston until the tea was paid for, restricted town meetings in Massachusetts, and allowed British officials accused of crimes to be tried in Britain instead of the colonies. Far from crushing the rebellion, these acts united the colonies in opposition. They saw it as an attack on the liberties of all Americans, not just those in Massachusetts. In response, delegates from 12 of the 13 colonies gathered in Philadelphia in 1774. For the First Continental Congress, they weren't calling for independence just yet. Their goal was to coordinate a response to the Intolerable Acts and to assert their rights as British citizens. They organized a massive boycott of British goods and sent a petition to the king, hoping for a peaceful resolution. But peace was not to be. In April 1775, the British military governor of Massachusetts learned that colonial militias, known as Minutemen, were stockpiling weapons in the town of Concord. He sent troops to seize the supplies. But colonial spies, including the famous Paul Revere, rode ahead to warn the countryside. On the morning of April 19th, British troops clashed with Minutemen on the village green in Lexington. A shot rang out, the shot heard round the world, and the American Revolutionary War had begun. As the British marched on to Concord and then retreated back to Boston, they were harassed by colonial militiamen firing from behind trees and stone walls. The hornet's nest had been kicked. A month later, the Second Continental Congress convened. By this point, fighting was already underway. The Congress established the Continental Army and, in a crucial decision, appointed a Virginian named George Washington as its commander-in-chief. Even then, many delegates still hoped for reconciliation with Britain. But the momentum for independence was building, fueled in part by a powerful pamphlet that swept through the colonies in early 1776. Written by Thomas Paine, Common Sense was a blistering attack on the very idea of monarchy and a passionate argument for American independence. Paine wrote in simple, direct language that everyone could understand. He argued that it was absurd for a tiny island to rule a vast continent, and that America's destiny was to be a beacon of freedom for the world. Common Sense sold hundreds of thousands of copies and was incredibly effective in shifting public opinion toward a complete break with Britain. By the summer of 1776, the Continental Congress was ready to make it official. They appointed a committee of 5, including John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and a young, eloquent Virginian named Thomas Jefferson, to draft a formal declaration. Jefferson was chosen to write the first draft, and he poured into it the enlightened ideals of the age. He argued that all men are created equal, endowed with certain unalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. He listed the many grievances the colonists had against King George, proving that the British government had become a tyranny. On July 2, 1776, the Continental Congress voted for independence. 2 days later, on July 4th, they formally adopted the final text of the Declaration of Independence. When John Hancock, the president of the Congress, signed his name in large, bold script, he reportedly said he wanted King George to be able to read it without his spectacles. The delegates who signed this document were committing treason. They were putting their lives and fortunes on the line. They were no longer fighting for their rights as Englishmen. They were fighting to create a new nation, the United States of America. The war itself would rage on for 7 more years, a long and difficult struggle with many dark moments for the Continental Army. But the Declaration of Independence gave them a cause to fight for, a vision of a nation founded on the principles of liberty and self-government. It was a revolutionary idea that would not only shape the future of America, but also inspire countless other movements for freedom around the globe. And that's the story of how America declared its independence. It wasn't a single event, but a long chain of decisions, protests, and sacrifices that led a group of colonies to take a monumental leap of faith. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments what historical event you'd like to see covered next. Until then, stay curious.